we have no real media in this state. Well, you have us.
It's really time for a parent revolution.
Never let a good crisis go to waste. That's what the left did with COVID in so many different ways.
Wind energy, especially offshore wind, is a big loser and just another government boondoggle.
Like, what's going on?
People are fed up. They lied to us then. They're lying to us now. They're assaulting our families.
What we do is we look at the lies of the left that they keep pushing out, that America doesn't work for black people. That is not true.
They want to now monopolize truth and say, truth is only what we say truth is. Damn the data, damn the science.
The key with science is it always needs to serve objective thinking. They just call anyone who challenges them a science deniers.
They're evil.
Shut up or we'll cancel you.
What we're going through is a cultural revolution.
This is big, and this is how change begins.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the Ocean State Current Command Bunker. Now playing from in the dugout, number 37, Mike Stenhouse.
The assault on Ocean State families continues by your own government, as they're now seeking to limit your right to defend yourself and your own family. The assault continues physically. Will the assault weapons ban pass and become law in the Rhode Island General Assembly this year, 2025? Hey, welcome to the dugout. Mike Stenhouse here, your host. In just a minute, you're going to meet Nick Grasso, who's been a long-time Second Amendment advocate. And we're going to go through comprehensively where this assault weapons ban stands in Rhode Island, what's already happened, what could happen, what do the upcoming votes look like. We're going to go through lawmaker by lawmaker when we get to the Senate committee side, because that's the key part, as you'll hear from our guests. And then we're going to take a broader look at court cases. We're going to also take a look at tricks the Senate president might decide to play. And then we'll take the broader look at Second Amendment court cases involving the state of Rhode Island, or just nationally, that are interest to Rhode Island Second Amendment, those who exercise their rights right there. So let's welcome back to In the Dugout, Nick Grasso. Nick, welcome back.
Thank you for having me, Mike.
Sure. What cap you got on today?
Ruger American 75th anniversary, I believe, was last year. Yep. They celebrated their 75th anniversary last year.
I got a Ruger cap somewhere, but I'm not going to try to fish it out right now. Now, Nick, you've recently been named the chairman of the Gatsby Project, which is a 501c4 political organization. Just tell us a little bit about what your objectives are and you're, of course, a longtime Second Amendment advocate in the state. You're a former candidate for the General Assembly 2 times. Tell us what your goals are with the Gatsby Project.
Yeah, I'm just looking to take all the experience that I've gained over the years and apply it to the organization and hopefully have a better outlook for future elections, and trying to hone in on some of the areas that we need to work on. And with the current atmosphere of the Second Amendment, I think it's a prime time to capitalize on people's emotions right now. We have to do that in order to energize our side. And I think this is the perfect time to revitalize everything and move in a different direction.
Before we get into specifics, you talk about energizing our side. It seems like the left, the opponents of Second Amendment rights, the opponents of self-defense rights, and opponents of families being able to fully defend themselves, as is their constitutional and God-given right, they seem to have a never-ending supply of money. And money, as you know, in politics often fuels energy. And they just keep coming at you, bill after bill, year after year. And our team and your team and those who are always on defense, it seems. Just talk about that larger dynamic of how the left just keeps putting on this assault on our constitutional rights.
Well, Mike, I think if you take a look at the broader perspective, broader picture of money being spent, right? I'm pretty sure if you go out to Oklahoma, if you go out to Nebraska, South Dakota, you're not seeing this money being pumped in there because they're never going to win there. So these people want victories, right? So they're gonna come to Rhode Island where they feel that this is an easier victory, and I think you're seeing more and more and more money getting pumped into states like Rhode Island and Massachusetts and Connecticut and New York, New Jersey, this little conglomerate of heavily blue states. So I think what we're really seeing right now is you get this national money that's really starting to pour into Rhode Island because it's one of the few places around the country that they can find a Second Amendment assault on us and be victorious. So I think what we're seeing right now is we're seeing a very heavy influx of this money coming into Rhode Island to attack us here because this is a victory for them.
Right, and there are other blue states where they're going. Which state? I mean, Oregon, Washington. What other states
Yeah,
are they really pushing?
the West Coast primarily, and then in the middle of the country, it's like Illinois is big for anti-2A, and then right here it's the New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, Mass, Rhode Island, and starting to creep into Vermont and even the New Hampshire and Maine a little bit. But
Okay.
Rhode Island seems to be a main focus right now of them finishing their attack on the Second Amendment by getting this assault weapons ban passed.
So, do you believe that Rhode Island, because we're relatively small, because we're so Democrat and progressive, woke left, because it doesn't probably take as much money to win votes here, do you believe? Are you saying then that you think Rhode Island is sort of the vanguard of this anti-Second Amendment rights a push that that precedent? We're basically precedent setting here.
I think the term that you hear a lot in the community is we're California of the East. They want this to be
Okay.
the new California. And Mike, and I think the product of that is when you look at our state government all the way top to bottom, there isn't a single Republican. So even when you go into states, like Massachusetts previously having a Republican governor, there was some pushback. Here in Rhode Island, there's no pushback. They're open with welcome arms. And you have to admit, from the federal level, you have a very powerful senator in Jack Reed. So, and to my disdain, even Sheldon Whitehouse. I mean, these guys have been around for a long time. So they open the door from a federal level down for these radical left progressives to come in with their money, and there's no stopping them. So Rhode Island is absolutely prime for these left organizations and sponsors to come in Rhode Island and spend money here.
But here's the surprise. That's the conventional wisdom. You might think that Rhode Island is going to be a pushover. But we do have a history, even in leadership, largely in words, not so much in action, but still we do have a history of Democrats being pro Second Amendment in this state.
Do.
And while most people think that these anti-Second Amendment, and we're going to talk about the assault weapons ban here in a second, are just going to automatically fly through, but that's not the case. Surprisingly, there is one hurdle in the General Assembly that the anti-rights movement might not be able to surpass, and we're going to get into that in just a second when we take a member by member look at the Senate Judiciary Committee, which might be an insurmountable hurdle, we hope at least, for these anti-constitutional rights movement. But let's take a step back and let's look at the actual bills. All right, so here is the House bill that passed the House Judiciary Committee, passed the House recently. We're going to take a look at the votes in just a second and just quickly. But basically, this Assault Weapons Ban Act of 2025, just quickly, we've had you on before, but just to recap, basically says what, Nick?
This basically says, effective July 1st of 2026, the majority of semi-automatic firearms will be illegal after July 1st, 2026. So they will be illegal to sell. You would only be exempt through a grandfather clause that now includes an amendment to the original bill, which you would have to go to your police station and obtain a certificate with serial number for every particular firearm that you have that would meet this class. And as we heard on the House floor debate, there's still a lot of question marks as to which guns, firearms would be banned under this bill.
All right. So not only is the question which guns are qualified by the left's definition of assault weapons, but also there's this grandfathering question. And so if you own, quote, one of these weapons now, if you hold on to it, you're safe, right? According to this bill.
If you go and get the certificate.
All right, that's what I want to understand. The certificate, tell me if I'm wrong, which I probably am. I understood the certificate to be voluntary to help protect yourself against any potential misunderstandings, but it's not a mandatory registration. So what is it you understand about these, as it says here, these certificates of possession? It says voluntary. So what does that mean? And what does it mean if you own one of these weapons and you don't get a certificate?
Well, from my understanding is you can leave it in the safe and just hope you never get caught. Or if you have to use it to defend your home, I believe you get in trouble because you didn't go and get this certificate.
All right, so they're kind of saying you better get one or else it's unknown, but you don't have to get one. So if they come into your house and you do have one of these, quote, assault weapons in your safe, because we do now have this safe storage bill law in our state as well. But if you do have it safely stored in your state and the police are there for some other reason and they happen to see it in your safe, your understanding, would that be violation of this new law? Just a law-abiding citizen safely and legally storing that weapon, but it gets discovered by police with no certificate. What is your understanding of that situation?
Yeah, you would be considered illegal at that point because now the burden of proof falls on you to when you obtain that firearm. When did you purchase that firearm? Is it, pre this date or is it post this date?
All right, because that's the other part of it. You can, if you get the certificate, you can hold on to your weapon supposedly according to the law, but you can't sell it, can't give it away to anybody, right? Or
Correct.
pass it. Can you pass it on down the line in your state even?
That's a very good point, Mike. I'm not going to comment on that because that was one of the arguments that was on the House floor, which gained no more clarity after having just, hours and hours of debate on it. So there was no clarity given to what happens when an estate gets passed down to,
Yeah, we'll leave it up to some left-wing prosecutor in the future. Yeah, that's why they put in these gray areas on purpose. All right, so that bill would ban the whole class of not just rifles, but handguns as well, right? Semi-automatic handguns. And they're basically recommending you get one of these voluntary certificates of possession if you already own one of these, but there's going to be no more movement of these weapons legally in the state. Is that a fair enough way to summarize it?
Yes. Yep.
All right, let's take a look at this. Let's take a look at the committee vote in the House. Now, these are both in front of the House and Senate Judiciary Committee. You can see it was 12 voted to support, 6 voted no, 3 Democrats on that committee voted no, along with the 3 Republicans on that committee. Any surprises in that committee vote?
The only real surprise for me is that Speaker Shekarchi walked in and voted ex officio. I didn't expect him to do that, especially that he was very open to meeting with the Second Amendment community. That was a surprise to me.
Yeah, they certainly didn't need his vote, right? So he was basically, because you guys thought you had some kind of understanding with him. You described that in our last time you were on the air that, hey, if you guys can present some good arguments, we'll be able. He seemed like he was trying to play it neutral, but by coming in here and choosing to vote, which is his right on any committee vote, he's basically sticking a thumb in your eye, isn't he?
That's pretty much how I felt, Mike. Again, I fully expected him to vote yes on the floor, and at that point, I'm not going to say I understand it, but I would have at least been okay with it. But the fact that he walked in when the vote wasn't even close, that really was just a show of power to say, you know what, I'm behind this ban, and too bad for you. So I that was a shock to me.
Now, of course, nothing moves in the House without the Speaker allowing it to move.
Correct.
I do not know this answer. Where in prior years, go back 5, 10 years, even before he was Speaker, where was Joe Shikarchi on Second Amendment issues in your book?
Well, I can speak to this personally. I personally took Joe out shooting when he first got elected to the House, and the general understanding that him and I had was he was pro Second Amendment at the time, and he really did vote with us. Uh, up until Nick Mattiello started to open the door for some of these bills to get passed, and then Joe slowly and surely, moved over to the left. So ultimately, you've seen a transition with him going from pro 2A to now anti Second Amendment.
Um, you can you're up at the State House a lot. You work with leadership and other lawmakers, but it's mostly a leadership thing. Well, I guess I think it's mostly a leadership thing, not entirely. I'm going to give you a real cynical view of it, but you can either confirm or not, or you can decline to answer. But the way I've been told by certain people, you take an issue like Second Amendment. Of course, these guys and gals are all about getting reelected, right? That's their number one priority. And when you're in a position of power like the Speaker, it's retaining your position of power. So it's both. But either way, they want money. They want money for their campaign. So when there's an issue like this, they like to draw it out. Let's draw it out over 3, 5, 7 years, and let's collect 3 to 5 to 7 years worth of lobbyist money and other advocacy money on this issue. Let's enrich ourselves before. Why would we bring it to a vote in a year or two and vote on it when we would be losing all those years of collecting money? And that seems to be the pattern on almost every controversial issue, that they get drawn out over a long period of time. And I was led to understand, but back when I used to do some lobbying up there, that hey, it was just about taking in as much money as I could before we would eventually support that controversial position. Your comment on that?
I certainly think it's a large piece of the puzzle. It certainly plays in. They raise a lot of money from both sides of the fence on this issue. And they certainly do like to take their time with everything. And I think it's a big piece of the puzzle. Is it the whole piece of the puzzle? No, but I do believe that is a big piece of the puzzle.
All right, let's go back to the House bill. Now, before we go to put up the floor vote on the larger bill, there were 9 amendments to that bill. I assume mostly introduced by pro Second Amendment, or if not all Republicans. That all failed. They all failed by pretty much 2-to-1 votes. Anything important we should know about any of those amendments? Because we often know that no amendment ever passes. I mean, if it's not supported by the Speaker.
I think on a bigger picture, I want people to pay attention to how representatives voted on the amendments. That's a very telltale sign to where some of these representatives truly stand on the issue.
Yeah, because some of the amendments make it so clear, like it's so obvious, so much common sense that this should or shouldn't be part of the bill, right? I mean, it's even more focused and clear than the larger bill itself. But yet, because they're so beholden to support this bill, no matter what happens to it, we're not going to support any changes to it. That you're right, it really does expose the radicalism of those who are voting against our Second Amendment rights. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Sure. And when you pull up the House floor, I'll give you one specific example of that.
But I don't have the votes with me on the actual amendment votes, but I do have the vote right here on the overall
Right.
bill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is perfect.
Yeah. So just so everyone knows, what I've got here in yellow are those Democrats who voted against the bill. You can see there were 28 nay votes, and it was decisive but not overwhelming. Those in orange were cowards and didn't vote, and those in green were those who voted against the bill. So what comes to light here to mind, Nick?
Sure. So I want everybody to understand that this is so important because what I'm seeing, especially on social media right now, is go to this list and look at how your rep voted. And I caution everybody, you need to do a lot more research and you need to understand how the state house works. Going to give you an example. My opponent, Deborah Falella, voted no for this bill. However, Deborah Falella is an F rated with the NRA, and she's voted for 13 of the 15 anti-gun bills that have come across her in her time being there. Pat Serpa, also in the same situation, she voted no on this bill. She's historically anti-Second Amendment. These are two representatives that went and sat with the speaker and said, Mr. Speaker, especially Deborah Falella, my opponent has the past 3 times has been A-rated NRA, Nick
Who's you?
Grasso,
Who's been you?
who's been me, right? So they get the pass to vote no on this bill. But see, here's the thing, Mike, that I want everybody to understand. When you go back and you look at all those amendment votes, Deborah Falella and Pat Serpa also voted no on all of those amendment votes because they truly don't care about this bill and they don't care about what's in it. But now, if you look at a no vote from another Democrat, Jackie Baginski, okay, she also voted no on all of the amendments, and she explained herself afterwards. She's like, "I'm so against this bill," and I can vouch for Jackie because I've known her personally. I've known her to be a shooter in the firearms community, so I can kind of vouch for her. But the understanding that Jack is, she's a strong fighter against these bills, but she's also like, I'm not voting for an amendment because I'm not okay with the amendment at this bill, period. I want this bill defeated. So that's a huge difference that I want voters to specifically hone in on. You can't just take this list and say, oh, well, Deborah Falella voted no for this bill. She must be good. No, she's still F-rated with the NRA, and she got her pass from the speaker because of who her potential opponent could be in the future. And there's a few people like her and Pat Serpa in particular that I want people to hone in on and say, don't be fooled by their vote. There's other dealings that go into the background. But now, when you take a Tom Norrie, you take a Bennett, Jackie Baginski, who's a no, Joe Solomon, Charlene Lima, Doc Corvasi, Representative Casey. These are people, when you go back and you look at their firearms related bills, they're always with us. They're historically always with us. They're good. You take Pat Serpa, you take Deborah Falella, they're both F-rated with the NRA. They voted for many, many.
They're just playing
anti-Second
pure
Amendment bills.
electoral politics here, right? So they prove they stand for nothing. They do whatever it takes to get reelected, and they have no principles. They have no morals. They have no legislative values. They'll just do whatever it takes to get by and get elected. That's basically what you're saying, isn't it?
It is. Yep.
All right. Now, I made a mistake. I should have highlighted Baginski here as a yellow, because in yellow are Democrats who voted no on the bill, and I should have highlighted Casey. I just went through this quickly right before, so thanks for collecting it. All right, very good. And those amendments, like like we said, were probably very common sense things. And that's just this. Okay. All right, let's go to the Senate now. So now the House has passed it, but the Senate bill, I assume, is has been amended to be identical, correct?
It is not.
All right, so there would have to be a reconciliation process, but it's similar, right?
Yeah, well, the meat and potatoes of the bill is similar. The voluntary certificate is the big change. You know, getting rid of the registry and putting the voluntary certificate would be the major change in the bill.
So the Senate bill has the registry in it.
As it stands right now, yes.
All right, do you think, and that will probably be amended before it has a committee vote, do you think?
I mean, essentially at this point it would have to, because if they pass this out of committee, the
They'd have to
bills
go back and do it
don't
again,
match.
right.
So yes.
All right, so this was the committee hearing was in first half of May, on May 14th. And this is the Senate now, Judiciary Committee. And at some point they'll bring it forward for Senate consideration. We don't know when that'll be. Do you have any indication when that might happen?
No. As of today, that has not been scheduled, and the agenda for Thursday's Judiciary Committee is already out, and there's nothing on that as we speak at this moment.
All right. Let's take a look now at the Senate Judiciary Committee, because that is not a sure thing. Let me just adjust my screen here, and then we're going to bring it up, and we're going to go through this person by person, and we're going to handicap the Senate vote. And this is going to be very interesting. So here's the bill. At some point, they're going to call it for committee consideration. There are 10 members of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Ex officio, that should be 6. No, 5. There should be 5 people there. So there's going to be a total of 15 votes, right? We added a few since you called me. So forget that 3. That should be a 5. But you show 1 Democrat here, 2 Democrats, 3 Democrats, and ex officio means you're a member of leadership and can choose to vote on the committee if you want to. 5 Democrats, along with 3 Republicans who you think out of those 15 are going to vote no. And then there's an unknown quantity in John Burke who hope will vote no. So what you're hoping, we don't know, and I want you to go through all this name by name, how much you can count. But what you're hoping is that you can see something as much as a 9-6 committee vote to defeat this bill in that Senate Judiciary Committee. Do I have it right?
Yes, I agree with that assessment that you posted there 100%.
All right. Do you want to just quickly go through each person and say how confident you are or where the question marks might be?
Yeah. Obviously, I'll cover the 3 in red very easily. They're Republicans. They've always been with us, absolutely 100%. And we'll start from the top. John Burke. I would compare John Burke to what I just spoke about on the House side. He's a guy who, under extreme pressure from the gun community will vote with us, but he's also voted for far more anti-Second Amendment bills than he has pro-Second Amendment votes. So John Burke is that guy that I think under extreme pressure could go either way. He's never solidly been in their camp. He's never solidly been in our camp. So while he right now, from all my understandings, is he says he's with us, but if I were on the other side of the fence, he would be the one that I would target that could possibly flip on us. So I would definitely keep.
And where is he from? Where is he from?
He's from the West Warwick area.
All right, so that's a pretty fair, somewhat red area, right? So voting against Second Amendment might not be smart politically, right, on a bill of this magnitude.
Correct, but he has voted for some
right.
pretty bad gun bills, and he still got reelected. So it's kind of a coin flip.
All right, these 3 here, the chair, the vice chair, McKinney, and Basayan, they're all hopelessly lost?
Hopelessly, yep.
All right, probably the same with Dawn Uer, I would think.
Yep.
And Anna Caseta.
Yep.
All right, now Val Lawson, she's the teacher union executive. She's now the president of the Senate since Dominic Ruggiero passed away. Is she definitely, is her history definitely anti-2A?
She's very anti-Second Amendment.
All right. And then we have these 2 over here, these 2 ex officio voters, the Democrat whip and the majority leader, Frank Chacon and Dave Tikoyan. How solid are they in your camp, in your view? Any question marks there?
Well, Frank Chacon has been a champion for pro-Second Amendment. He holds a federal firearms license, so he can legally sell and transfer firearms. He doesn't own a shop, but he is an independent FFL, so he does sell, a few guns and do transfers for people. He can legally do that. I can't possibly see after his entire career of being a Second Amendment supporter that he would flip on us. So I would solidly say he's in our corner.
All right, Tikoyan?
Tikoyan, you're talking about a guy in just a second term is been elected by his peers as whip. Wildly popular. Every conversation that I've had surrounding him is that he's solidly a Second Amendment supporter. He's with us. He's given no indication that he would ever vote against us. So being that he's this young you have to take him for his word at it. So we keep him
And
in
he
our
doesn't
corner.
really have a track record on this?
Unfortunately, no, because like I said, I think the only bill that came before him would have been safe storage. So he doesn't really have much of a track record there.
How did he vote on that? Do you remember?
I honestly don't remember.
All right.
I would have to
All right.
look that
Then we
up.
go to share this again. Then we go to Lou Raptakis, is generally known as one of the more conservative Democrats from the Coventry area. What's his record and what's your expectation there?
Raptakis has always been with us, solid fighter, and there's been times where he sits down and refuses to get up with the other Democrats. So uh, I trust Raptakis almost as much as I trust the three Republicans up there.
All right. Patalano, I don't know anything about him.
Yeah, this was an interesting one for me because being that he's a police officer, generally these are the types that you really don't have a lot of faith in. But to my shock, like he spoke at Jessica Dela Cruz's press conference that he was completely against this. And from all the conversations that I had, he's been against this since day one, and he never has ever wavered on it. And to me, the fact that he got up at the press conference and spoke in front of the media,
Yeah,
I
that's
just
putting it
have to,
that's putting it out there pretty good.
yeah, I have to take him for his word on that.
All right, same thing. I don't know Dimitri.
Andrew Dimitri's my senator. He's great. He's a member of at a local gun club. He put that out there in one of his letters that he sent to his constituents when he ran. So there's nothing to hide there with Andrew. Andrew is a solid Second Amendment supporter, and a member of our gun community. So I have full faith in him as well.
So it seems to me then that based on what you just said, that's 9-6 in your favor, voting down this bill, voting no. Well, 8-6 with John Burke, you think leaning your way to make it 9-6. If they were to flip Burke and they were to flip to Coyne, who seems to be the only possible one, that would be their only hope to win it 8-7 in that committee. Is that the way you see it? Their only hope?
That's their only hope. Yeah.
All right. So the Senate president obviously knows, and their whip knows pretty much where these people stand, where you don't. Of course, people can change their minds. So if it's looking as hopeful for us and as negative for the sponsors of this bill in the Senate Judiciary Committee, which it has to pass in order to move forward, there are some tricks then that the Senate president could play to try to avoid that committee vote or to just nullify that committee vote. Why don't you take us through the two options that brand new Senate President Valerie Lawson might play? And it would be a hell of a big political risk for her to jump right in and to pull some of these. I mean, they're technically legal, but they're certainly immoral and illicit in my view. But talk about some of the trick procedures she might pull.
Sure. And Mike, I want everybody to understand because I try not to hide anything because the whole goal is to get people to understand the entire process, right? And you can't just look at these votes and say it's this cut and dry. You have to understand Val Lawson just got elected Senate president, right? She had a challenge from Ryan Pearson, who challenged Ruggiero and probably would challenge her again. So she has to look at the fact that I have 24 senators that want this bill to be passed, right? But 7 of them went and voted with Ryan Pearson against me. She quote unquote had to get some of these conservative Democrats to align with her, and the rumors are that she promised them that she wouldn't pass this bill. Now, you get elected Senate president, and here's the dilemma that Val Lawson sits in. How do I get reelected by my peers in January to become Senate president yet again? Because it's not automatic. She has to get elected again. She knows she would face a challenge from Ryan Pearson. Now she knows that she still has these conservative Democrats that could flip on her. So she's in a box. She's in a real conundrum here. You look at this Senate committee, can't be passed. right? There's one potential out for Val Lawson. Let's include this as a potential outcome. She could very well sit there and say, "We do not have the votes in Senate committee. I have to deal with the cards that I was dealt with by Dominic Ruggiero. He created this committee. He organized this committee. These are the cards that I am dealt with. I don't have the votes to pass this on Senate committee." She lets it die, and then she hopes that the same result for her happens in January. That's option number one, which would be a victory for us, right?
Just let the committee do its committee and let the chips fall where they fall.
Yep, that is still an option.
And that's the normal ethical legislative process.
Correct. Now,
All right, then there are some abnormal, what I would call unethical legislative processes. So talk about option 2 and 3.
okay, so option two will go in chronological order. So we've seen this happen with the abortion ban.
Right, exactly.
Abortion
It's
bill.
not like this hasn't happened before. It happened just a few years ago. Exactly.
Yep. Abortion was at Senate Judiciary Committee, where many felt that that's where it should be because it was a huge, judicial change to our process, and it was the same thing. They didn't have the votes there. They had some Democrats like Harold Metz, who, even though he was pretty progressive, he was a pastor and he was pro-life, so he dug in and wouldn't change his vote. They didn't have the votes there, so they took the bill, removed it from judiciary, and put it in human and health services, where again the whip will go back and say, "Hey,
Before or after they held the committee vote in judiciary?"
I don't believe they actually held a judiciary
Right, I don't
committee
recall
vote."
that they did either. All right, so they saw Ruggiero saw the writing on the wall there, just like we're kind of seeing it here. And before they even brought it up for an embarrassing defeat in that committee, he just switched committees to a committee where he had the votes to pass it, right?
Correct.
And so Lawson could do that here either before or after, even after this. So this committee, this Judiciary Committee we're looking at right here, could vote this bill down, and then she could just say, "I'm still going to move it to another." It doesn't kill it at that point.
Mike, I'm not sure what the Senate rules kind of dictate there, but we also have to go back to what we spoke to in the prior conversation. We haven't gotten an amended version on the Senate side that matches that amended version on the House side.
Right.
So on the specific Senate rules, I don't know if this bill gets beat in Senate Judiciary Committee, if they could still move it to another committee and then accept the amended version in that committee. So that is still, I think, an option.
So they're probably doing all that internal whipping right now to try to figure out who would vote for what under what circumstance as a member of what committee, right? They're probably doing all that right now, right?
Right. And, we've heard this before by, on the national level that this is a public health issue. So could they move it to the exact same committee that they moved the abortion bill to in Human Health Services?
All right. All right. So, and I first want to say what you pretty much alluded to. If this passes this committee or any committee, it will win on the floor, right? With at least 20, as you're saying, at least 24 of 38 votes, if not more. Well, that's what you're saying, right? It would absolutely win on the floor, right?
Yeah, 100%.
100%. All right. So getting it to the floor if Lawson wants to go to these extreme measures is how do I get it to the floor? So one way, leave option 1, leave it as it is, let committee do its work. If it passes, it goes to the floor. If it doesn't, it's dead for the year. Now, option 2, switch committees, try to revive it in another committee, probably before this Judiciary Committee would vote on it, because I don't think they would want that embarrassment of having it voted down. And then there's option 3, which is to bypass the committees entirely. Tell us about that one.
Yeah, well, if you remember on the MAG ban, we fought very hard, and I'll go back to Senator Burke. We put tremendous amount of pressure on Senator Burke, and he did vote for the other 2 bills. But on the MAG ban, we put so much pressure on him on the weekend. We had people calling his house. We had people calling his cell phone. We were relentless on him to have him switch to our vote, and we did that. And it caused a deadlock on the Senate Judiciary Committee, and thus it did not pass. So that bill did lose in Senate Judiciary Committee. Moments later, Senate President Dominic Ruggerio convened the Senate floor, and he said, if I have a two-thirds vote to vote yes to bring the House's version over to the Senate directly to the Senate floor for a vote, I would need two-thirds of you to vote yes. And he knew he had it by one vote. So Dominic brought the bill right to the floor.
All right. So you're saying there's a Senate rule that says if the Senate president, regardless of what committees do, if he wants to bypass all that, or in this case, if Valerie Lawson wants to bypass all that, she can say, I'm going to bypass the committees, and with a two-thirds, which means 26 out of the 38 senators, right? 26 out of 38. You know there's 24 for sure. We can imagine they could probably muster two more. But with two-thirds majority, they can bypass the committees and immediately bring the House bill to the Senate floor.
Yes.
And then, so they would vote to bring it to the floor, and then they would presumably vote on the bill, which
the votes would essentially match.
Right. They would essentially match. So, wow. Okay. And again, that's a very extreme measure that happened with the magazine ban legislation. Could it happen again? Again, would this new Senate President Valerie Lawson risk her Senate presidency over this, which you talked about earlier, which I didn't understand? That's very interesting. The internal politics to remain in her seat of power. So there's a lot of drama yet to be played, a lot of questions, right? I mean, you're feeling pretty good about the committee vote, but how worried are you about these other two parliamentary tricks they might play?
I'm extremely worried about it because, again, knowing that there's guys like Patrick Crowley out there that are putting a tremendous amount of pressure on her, saying, Val, we fought for so long. Like, this is the bill we've always wanted. You're right at the doorstep. Let's just do it. We'll back you. We'll make sure you get Senate president again. I can only imagine the amount of money. She just had a huge fundraiser last night. Let's not take that out of the equation. At the Crown Plaza. So I'm sure that there was a tremendous amount of money coming in from the anti-Second Amendment crowd.
Or at least being promised.
Or at least being promised, yeah. And, really from our side, everything's always kind of grassroots, and we can't match that type of organization and that type of money. So you have to understand that the pressure on her right now is going to be 10 times what it is from our side. We can email, we can do the grassroots stuff, but the power of the money all lies on that side.
Yeah, but it's more than that. I mean, it's a function of power. Let's go back and bring this up. We said, the only way they can win in the normal legislative process would be to flip Burke and to flip Tokoyan. So you, as the head of the Gatsby Project, or as head of or the other pro-Second Amendment advocates, might be putting equal pressure, while they might be getting pressure from leadership and lobbyists there. Pro-Second Amendment might be putting pressure on them on their own to say, no, vote against this bill. But then that all could be for naught if they decide to flip the script and go to one of these extreme measures. And that's completely out of your control. That's where the power comes in. She might know right now whether or not she's going to be playing any of these dirty tricks, and whether all your advocacy, all your lobbying, all the work of pro-Second Amendment advocates could all be for naught if she just decides to move it to another committee or bypass the committee process altogether and bring it to the floor. That's where the power is. They know what they're going to do, but you don't.
True, Mike, and previous to Dominic passing away, we had a pretty good handle on, where things were, and one of the things that we did at the Gatsby projects, we spent a tremendous amount of money on what we felt is a defense that we've never done in the Second Amendment community. So we ran a poll. We ran a professional poll from a national firm, and we did the only thing that we felt that matters to any of these senators and reps is getting reelected. And we put the results right in front of them and said, look, you vote for this bill, people are not going to reelect you. And that's the only way that you can fight that type of power. But even when we did that, now you have this, circumstance that comes out where, unfortunately Dominic passes away and we have a new Senate president, and you could take all of that work and she still could have the power of saying, okay, I'm going to remove that factor from the equation and put it over here to people that won't be affected by this.
And all your work and all your money was completely for naught.
Yeah.
All right. Let's all right. So that's the status of the bills, right? This is very interesting, and we bring this to you educationally, viewers, so you know exactly how the sausage is made, how corrupt this process can be, how these lawmakers, if there's a will, there's a way, they will find a way to get their bill passed if they really want to go to those extreme measures. And we've seen it happen on many bills in the past. The abortion bill and the magazine ban being the most recent. So we're at their mercy. They have all the power to play whatever dirty cards they want. It's just a question of whether they choose to play them or not. If they don't want to lose this bill, they won't lose this bill is the bottom line. All right, let's go to a higher level. This is not about, they don't care about guns. They don't care about crime. We don't have a problem in our state. Joe Shikarchi said it all wrong. He made some kind of statement. Every mass murder or attempted mass murder in this country has to do with assault weapons. No, it doesn't. We just saw in, where was it? Where was it? Colorado, with people using homemade, Molotov cocktails to try to kill people. If people want to kill people, they'll find a way to kill them, just like these lawmakers will find a way to pass this bill if they want to, whether it's a car, whether it's a knife, whether it's Molotov cocktails, whether it's roadside bombs, burning Teslas. It's not just about assault weapons, Nick. The speaker was wrong.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, look at the damage these rioters are doing, and they're not using any guns whatsoever. The gun is never going to be the problem. And like you said, Mike, this issue they don't care. They'll tell you straight out. It's a social issue to gain votes by people who really do believe that gun control will accomplish something, but they themselves up there are pandering to their progressive base. That's all this is. They don't care one way or another. And they have no problem trampling your rights to gain more power and to keep themselves getting reelected.
Because there is no conclusive evidence that strict gun control laws or even assault weapons bans like these in states or federally have done anything to reduce murders or crime.
Right.
There is no evidence to that effect. You can make arguments, but if you want gold standard evidence, there is no such evidence, as I understand.
I mean, from this country, I mean, you take that, but I mean, you know what? I'll push it back a little bit. You could take Chicago for an example that doesn't have a single gun store within its city limits, where guns are virtually completely banned in Chicago, and they have one of the worst crime rates in the country. But we always look at countries outside of us that have strict gun control, and those countries that strict gun control have much higher crime rates than we do.
Yeah, in fact, the opposite is true. Where concealed carry is allowed, crime rates are actually lower. In
those states that have constitutional carry now, crime is plummeting. Like it's going down because criminals know that the majority of people are now armed.
Well, I saw a quote. I was doing some research on this. I can't bring it up, but I remember seeing it clearly. A study some years ago surveyed 2,000 gun crime criminals who use guns, and they said they were more afraid of concealed carry permit citizens than they were of law enforcement.
Yeah, I mean, look at the state of Florida. We have so many sheriffs in and police chiefs down in Florida, they just get right on TV in front of the mic, and we encourage our citizens to shoot people that break into their houses. It's not just one sheriff; multiple sheriffs now have gone on TV. And if you think about it from a law enforcement strategy, they put this message out there like, "Hey, if you break into homes in the state of Florida, we encourage the homeowners to shoot them." Like you're doing us a favor. Now that message gets broadcast out to criminals like, hey, I'm gonna think twice about breaking into a house in the state of Florida. I'll just buy a bus ticket and I'll go do my crime up in New York City or Providence, Rhode Island, where they don't want them to shoot us criminals.
Now, this is about power, political power. It's also about money. I'm going to get to the money in a second. Um, but they just want to, whether it's First Amendment rights, Second Amendment rights, Fourth Amendment rights, Sixth Amendment rights, they just want to keep infringing on the Constitution and on our rights, and this is just another notch in that belt. I don't think any of these people legitimately think that passing this bill is going to have any practical or positive impact in this state. They just want that power to keep putting more control in the government, assaulting, as we with our theme, assaulting families, assaulting citizens' rights, and gaining more power for the government and less rights for the people. But let's talk about money. You look at the State House, you look at the rallies, the pro Second Amendment, you guys are the yellow shirts, right? Up there. The anti-rights people are in the red or the orange, right? Is that right? Do I have that right? Up there.
Yeah, they have two colors, yeah.
Yep. Who? I know Michael Bloomberg is one of them, but who is funding? And you guys normally grossly outnumber them as far as advocates. I don't know what public polling. I mean, public polling is a little different because the media just positions us, like assault weapons or these evil military machine guns. Everybody, that's what people are too stupid to know what this is really about, most citizens. But when you look at people at the State House, overwhelmingly your side has the numbers, but yet they may vote against the people on that. But where is the money coming from to fund this left? Because we know the left doesn't get really into anything unless they're getting paid for it, whereas we do it because we believe in our rights. Tell us about the money.
I mean, yeah, the big guy that you said there is Michael Bloomberg, and his, every town movement is the big one. And here in Rhode Island, every town, you don't see much of every town. You see more of the moms demand action. But Mike, it's a network of money being funneled down from guys like Bill Gates and Michael Bloomberg. I haven't really dug into the Soros tree of money where it comes down, but even just having run in local races here, I've been able to track Bill Gates money coming from him through organizations right down to people running for State House here. So it's alarming and very surprising that you do see money being funneled from these billionaires right down to state rep and state senate seats right here in Rhode Island. So the money is coming in from big billionaires like that. Again, it's not direct. You have to trace it, but they create these organizations and they create these national groups down to the state groups, and the money just funnels right down in there. And I mean, it's no secret.
This is out of state national money from national donors,
Mike,
left-wing groups.
I have saved screenshots on Craigslist from these groups hiring people to go out on gun night and go put a red shirt on and go protest at a rate of $20 an hour. I mean, these are actual legit posts. And at the end of the day, you really can sit there and say there's technically not anything illegal about it.
Right. But that's what I said earlier. They seem to have a never-ending source of energy because it's fueled by money. And money, when you're getting paid to do something, you have a little more incentive to do it than if you weren't getting paid for it. So they just seem to have a never-ending source of that. And it's just stunning that there was such money behind it. Now, what about on your side? It seems to me that there's no national money coming in to the pro Second Amendment groups. Anything you raise, you really have to scramble and scrape what you can from local donors. Do I have that correct?
Yeah, I mean, especially here in Rhode Island, everything's, from a grassroots level up. It's not from the top down. Even your national organizations, they're funded by us, the members, at the local level. They're not funded by any sort of billionaires or anything like that. So whether you take, the GOA, the FBC, the NRA, Second Amendment Foundation, any one of these larger groups, they're still funded by guys like me and you sending in a $35 a year donation for a membership fee. So, they don't have the billions of dollars. They barely have, seven-figure accounts to help fund this stuff.
Wow. All right, let's spend the last 5 minutes, Nick, if you have 5 more minutes, just talking about the landscape when it comes to the courts, when it comes to the various lawsuits.
Yeah,
Again,
so
yeah, and I just want to preface it this way: while Rhode Island, there's a number of gun control laws in Rhode Island that are being challenged. I'm sure. Let's start off with the U.S. Supreme Court. I'm sure it was disappointing to you, as it was to me, and all Second Amendment advocates, that the Supreme Court failed to hear the assault weapons or magazine ban cases um, uh, right now, although there was some indication that we're probably going to have to hear them in the next year or two. So start at the Supreme Court. They passed the big Bruin decision a few years ago. But the Supreme Court, how do you see the landscape?
well, Mike, I'm gonna be very honest with you. I never liked the Bruin case. I felt that the Bruin case gave the Supreme Court an out because they went in and they defined a lot of things, and they sent a lot of cases back down to the lower courts. Go ahead and review your case based on a decision in Bruin. To me, that was almost a scapegoat. I'm not as high on the Supreme Court as others may be. I really did not like the Bruin decision because of that issue that they addressed in the Bruin case. So now we fast forward from the Bruin case to now, and I think the Bruin case hurt some of those cases that were making its way up to the court. So now we finally got Snopes up there, and ironically, Ocean State Tactical, in the Magban case, we got that case up to the Supreme Court. However, our Magban case did not go through all the courts. We tried to get relief right at the Supreme Court. I don't think the Supreme Court liked that, so they threw that out. Too bad, because you would like to have seen Rhode Island be the one that won that case. However, the Bonta case that's coming out has gone
Which
through.
case is that? Which case is that?
The Bonta case. It's another Magban case.
Okay, yeah.
That has gone through all the levels. So that particular bill, that particular case should be taken up by the Supreme Court very shortly, and we have a lot of faith that that case there will help on the mag ban.
I mean, when this Supreme Court has ruled, and there haven't been a lot of them, and the Bruin case was the biggest of them all, but they seem to be definitely a pro Second Amendment majority. If they hear a case, the problem is getting a case in front of them or them accepting a case, right? That's kind of the issue right now.
Right. And Mike, from a guy who's not an attorney and is certainly not a judge.
Me either.
The Second Amendment is so clearly written. To me, it has the greatest piece of punctuation in all of history when the comma is placed in there, the right of the people to keep and bear arms. So this notion that they didn't take this case because they wanted some stronger language, they wanted this, they want that, they had no problem taking abortion. They made a huge political hardship for conservative bases when they ruled on Roe versus Wade. And yet they still will not take up the Second Amendment cases. I have a huge issue with that, and I'm not going to sit here and get into my position on Roe versus Wade. That has nothing to do with it. On a constitutional basis, These Second Amendment cases are so cut and dry, are so simple for the courts to deal with because our Second Amendment is so concise and clear. It doesn't leave room for interpretation like the left wants you to believe. It doesn't. So the fact that they sent they wouldn't hear the Snopes case out of Maryland really disappoints me. Now, I'm going to throw one last caveat at you, Mike. You do have a lot of people in the Rhode Island gun community that feel that we should be the martyr. That, you know what? This bill in particular, if it were to pass,
let's pass the bill so the Supreme Court will have to rule on it, basically.
and our bill is so bad that the Supreme Court could not possibly ignore this bill, and then they would finally be able to rule that no class of weapons can no class of firearms. I keep using the word weapons. I'm sorry, I shouldn't do that, but any class of firearms wouldn't be banned under the Second Amendment. So there is that caveat to our bill here in Rhode Island.
All right, two points. I'm going to get back to that in just a second. But you talked about how clearly written the four corners of the Constitution, all the words. There is no room for interpretation, like you said. But it's also the Second Amendment. There's free speech, free religion, and then there's right to defend yourself. I mean, so how fundamental the right to life, liberty? Well, you need to defend yourself to protect your right to life and liberty. I mean, it's the Second Amendment of the United States Constitution. That tells you something too, but yet they're screwing around with it all the time. Now back to your other point, which was I just lost my train of thought. You just said, what did you just say?
About our bill being passed so that.
Oh yeah, how do you feel about that? Because there is a practical side to that. That if this bill does pass and become law, that it's certainly going to inflame the situation and probably force the Supreme Court to take this up sooner than later. On the other hand, it's a really tough pill to swallow, and it's a really tough burden to place on Rhode Islanders in the interim. So where do you come down on that?
I'll answer this in a couple of layers. First and foremost, no, I would never want to see this bill pass because it's going to affect me and it's going to affect I think virtually every firearm owner out there because this bill is so broad. However, if they do pass this bill, I'm going to fully embrace it. I'm going to use it to my advantage. I'm going to use all of the motivation. I'm in a lot of different social media groups, and I have guys that are chomping on the bit that want to get working on 2026 elections. These are folks that have never been involved before. They just keep crying out to me. They're like, "Hey, when can we meet? When can we meet?" And I'm like, "Let's just get through the next 2 weeks."
So you're saying if it does pass, you're thinking certain lawmakers in our General Assembly can be held accountable to this?
Yes, absolutely. And that's what we're going to do. We're not only going to capitalize on the energy that we're going to get some pissed off voters that are going to want to get involved, but we're also going to use Rhode Island's opportunity again to try to push this case through the courts and get this case up to the Supreme Court.
All right, last question. It passes General Assembly, still has to be signed by the governor. The governor has made it clear that he would sign it, I think, but I'm going to have you comment on that. But here's my larger question. Dan McKee, to me, I see a lot of parallels to him and Joe Biden. They were both supposedly had this image before they were governor or before they were president as being relatively moderate. But yet once they got into the highest executive position, they just went far, far left. What is Dan McKee's history in Second Amendment? We know he's going to sign this bill should it pass, but is he also someone that we can rightly say he stands for nothing? He's got no principles other than political principles of getting reelected. Did he have somewhat of a pro Second Amendment positions in his earlier career?
I would say no, because we did meet with him while he was a mayor, and then when he decided to run for lieutenant governor, we invited him to come to a very large meeting, and his responses were not aligned with being pro Second Amendment.
He's pretty consistently anti Second Amendment.
Yeah.
All right, fair enough. All right, Nick, last question: yes or no? That's it. Do you expect this assault weapons ban to become law this year?
I'm going to go with yes.
You're going to make a prediction that by hook or crook, they will find a way to get it done.
Yes.
All right.
I hope I'm wrong.
Even though the legislative process would indicate otherwise, they will circumvent. You talk about those who accused conservatives of being anti-democratic. Here you go. We're gonna completely circumvent and subvert the normal democratic process just to get our agenda passed, no matter what we have to do. All right, there you have the prediction from Nick Grasso. We will see what happens in the coming weeks, and obviously, Nick, we'll have you back on to talk about it whenever that does happen. Thank you. Very generous with your time today. Good luck, and we'll see where things go.
Thank you for having me, Mike.
You know, folks, as we sign off here today, you know, it's advocates like Nick Grasso who aren't getting paid to do this. These are just people who believe in America, who believe in our Constitution, and believe in your rights and my rights, believe in, more specifically, in our rights to be able to defend ourselves and our families. And he's just out there putting it on the line because he does stand for something. And these are the kinds of people we need to elect, people who are unequivocal in their belief and values that citizens' rights should be defended at all costs. These, like Patricia Serpa and Deborah Falella, who we talked about in the House, who will just go whatever way the wind blows, whatever way makes it more convenient. If you look at candidates, you will see which ones you can depend on and which ones have the checkered record. Nick Grasso and others like him, you know where they stand. I admire him for his work. It's an uphill battle for all of us. And boy, I wish we had more people like Nick in our state. And I wish we had more people like you, the viewers who stayed through this really comprehensive review of the assault weapons ban and Second Amendment issue here in our state. So we thank you for tuning in. And until next game, Mike Stenhouse, we'll see you then.